Hey there, everybody. It's a little past 5 in the afternoon, I think, uh, on a Monday, and we are down in the woods. Um, we are doing something in particular today, which we'll get to in just a moment, but you may notice that there is a whole lot of light, and I do chalk that up partly to this tree getting knocked down in a storm earlier this year, and also to this tree getting knocked down in a storm back here. But those are not the only trees that have come out this year. So let's talk about that. And so, looking ahead of where I am, the camera is now flipped relative to that first shot. Um, the big pine is right there. So, just to your left. And in this area here, last year, what I had done was take a number of the American beech side branches and things that had been damaged in the snow, several from right along this line here, and had laid them out in parallel and left them as a woody mulch layer that was more fitting of a description of a brush pile than it was as stick mulch. I generally think of stick mulch as smaller in length, and brush piles more like whole branches laid across. Generally, you want to do crisscross and crisscross and crisscross so that there are multiple layers that can be used as habitat space for various creatures. But it was more for exclusion and to keep the leafy material below those leaves and those branches moist through the growing season. And this year, we can see that many of the leaves have browned and have begun filling the cracks and crevices, but the sticks remain. And so it did accomplish what I had wanted for it last year. That is not a stable space for my feet. To the point that I am now able to plant more plants. You can see some comfreys planted between these two logs on the border of the path uphill from us. You can see a very anemic looking plant over in here, and then down at my feet we have a few more movers and shakers, not all of whom are happy. One of the things that I have decided this year is that if I'm unable to really get a plant that is starting to look like it's chlorotic to bounce back, I'm just going to plant it here and let it do its thing. It can provide us with propagative materials later on in its life, and I'm not going to fight trying to get it back up to a point where a total stranger will think, wow, that's a great looking plant, and buy it. I'd rather just reinvest that energy here for future plants. But so the leafy full stick mulch debris pile definitely did the job. We have clovers coming up in a couple of places. We have some new tree seedlings, like little maple seedlings, popping up in various places. I have seen some Solomon seal or some false Solomon seal in a few areas. Oaks are coming up. And so removing those beeches definitely gave us a little bit more light that allowed for germination of some of the endemic life that was in this pile when we started collecting leaves and seeds in the fall. And now that we have a substrate that is able to grow plants, our next step is to keep bringing more and more fertility in to allow these plants to push sugars that will push forward the development of the rest of this substrate in here. One of the key differences between warm climate, tropical chop and drop coppice agroforestry, and temperate cold climate coppice agroforestry is that down in the tropics, their plant material is very often more herbaceous Um, as in, there is less lignified structure in those plants, which make them faster to break down, and the temperatures and the amount of moisture also lead to a faster cycling of those nutrients. And there is less processing that has to go into those materials being ready for full interaction with the soil microbe community. Whereas in the cold, in the northern climates, like where we are, and some of our friends in the same latitudes or further north, our plants grow with very lignified structure very early on. They are woody at the same time as being herbaceous, at least for our tree species. There are some, obviously, like sumacs and the like, that are of a weaker lignin or that take longer to become as woody as things like oak or maple or beech or birch do. But they are still rather woody. And so there is additional processing that has to go into it. And so that's not to say that it's best to just let them lie as you've cut them, um, or that it is best to spend a lot of time doing chippings and things. What I'm saying is that it depends on what your goals for that particular usage and space are.
Now, obviously, I am doing some of these fairly small, and that's just a function of me looking to prioritize the surface area and contact between each of these bits of leaf. Some of them I'm still keeping bits of stem, uh, and you can see, I'll find a better shot, but you can see that a lot of green still exists in these branches that we are cutting because, as we know, the spring and summer branchwood contains a whole lot of nitrogen and the rest of the growth hormones that are spurring these plants towards greater photosynthetic capabilities. But there's a lot of variation that could come into play with this type of approach. Perhaps you're looking to keep these from blowing away because your site is an incredibly windy one, rather than snipping this tiny amount of woody material, which will not really weigh it down. You could take something like this and use this, which is going to be far harder for the wind to pick up and carry away from the place that your design calls for it. So there are a lot of different approaches to doing this. I will set you all up somewhere else and show you another method that you might choose to employ depending on what exactly you're looking for.
So you can see the amount of progress we've made just covering in a 2 to 3 layer of leaf green mulch down in this garden space. And you can see over here the amount of branchwood I still have to go through. And I can hear some of you in the back right now going, this dude should probably just go invest in a small diameter chipper for himself and save himself a whole lot of trouble and effort and hand cramping and time. And you are not wrong. Doing this with a chipper would certainly be faster, it would be noisier, and to me, there is a certain unspecified value in allowing the biological processes of breakdown to occur in as broad a depth as possible. If I were to send all of this material through a chipper, it's going to make it all very homogeneously sized, and it is going to begin the catalyzing process of the sugars, starches, and nitrogens that are bound up in the cells of these leaves and make them less nutritious for the caterpillars and the worms and the slugs and the bugs that are the functional catalysts for higher order proteins and nutrients forming in our subsoil communities. It's those micro herd members that are cycling those nutrients from this green material for us into new bioavailable nutrients for the plants that we are growing. And if we have just a big pile of composting things, we are going to invite composting critters rather than breakdown critters that are specifically for fresh material. And so there's kind of a trade-off between efficiency of time and complexity of breakdown, and that is a value judgment and a call that you'll have to make for yourselves, given what your time constraints are, given what your goals are, and given what the behaviors of your site are like. So keep that in mind for yourselves. It's certainly a good idea, but there are trade-offs to those realized efficiencies. But Eric, I can hear you say, my soil's already pretty good. I don't think I need to add nitrogen at this point. I'd really just rather add habitat for the community. And that's awesome. I'm glad you're a friend and a compatriot, and I'd be proud to call you my sibling. So I just have a pair of two-handed loppers, and we've just tossed down some sticks, and all you have to do to really start building that shape is cut a few of them. You don't have to go too hard. I'm not doing anything crazy. I'm just adding a little bit of bend and complexity and letting them lay a little bit tighter. And by doing this, so by starting off in this orientation and making slight cuts that are not in sections and do leave side branches connected, what I'm doing is creating a structure that you can see three-dimensionally if I come over in here. And so each of these little gaps will be something that a small woodland creature, small birds, rodents, squirrels, critters, will use. And you can increase the efficacy of this by taking some branches and laying them crossways. And so our first run was in this orientation. Our next run is in this orientation. And we're still adding to the bulk, and we're still adding to the moisture holding capabilities of the mulch that we've dropped already. But these additional branches in this orientation are adding habitat, and they're adding additional weight that will hold down the nutrient dense, high surface contact mulch that we've put down on some of the other plants. And in this way, we can build up our structure. We can come back later in the year or the next time that we do a chop and drop function on some of our woody species. We can come back and we can trim these so that they sit flatter and we can add more depositional material on top of this. And that's perfectly acceptable. In fact, doing stick mulch like this I won't claim hard numbers because I don't have hard numbers, but doing stick mulch like this in such an overlapping method around target plants may help to defray browse from them. And in the cases of ones where they are particularly chlorotic, having this little bit of additional shade may encourage them to produce more chlorophyll to push out into their cells so as to capture a higher amount of light than they would be getting from the dappled shade that they are under. So yeah, there's a lot of ways to approach doing this kind of chop and drop of woody materials in cold climate permaculture systems. And I'd encourage you all to explore it and to share your notes here or online and tell us where you're doing it. Tell us what you're up to. Share with the group. We are all of us looking for those ways and those methods that will work in climate analogs for us and give us results that we are looking for. There's very few wrong things to do. There are plenty of wrong things to do. What a terrible statement. You could do a lot of wrong things, but chopping and dropping trees that are overrepresented in your landscape or who cast an inordinate amount of shade given their productivity are perfect candidates for a chop and drop regime or as one prong of doing chop and drop, cycling the nutrition, cycling the chlorophyll and all of the constituent materials, and building up your system from the ground up. Sure, some of those tree roots are not going to push back fresh growth. We are in the middle of the growing season. It's the start of the second week of August, and there may not be enough time in this particular season for them to push new growth or to have enough energy left to store in the roots. We will have to see. But if they are overrepresented in our landscape, they are here. If they're overrepresented in your landscape, losing one or two, but cycling all of that nutrition and all of that energy into more functional plants for the space is a decent call to make, and I would encourage you to do that. So, yeah, those are some of our notes from today's activities, and I hope this gives you all something to consider for the spaces you're stewarding. And yeah, if you like it, like the video. If you are subscribed, thanks. If you're not, consider subscribing. Till next time, thanks for watching. Happy planting.